Hi and welcome. In this video we're going to be taking a look at the strip, service and reassembly of a Ricoh automatic watch movement, often referred to as either an R31 or an R61 movement. However, I couldn't find any specific information on a caliber number. These seem to be simply just a Ricoh automatic movement, which are common among all of the Ricoh automatics. The only variance being some show a day date at the bottom and some show them at 3 p.m, which obviously requires the printing on the day date wheels to be slightly different, but otherwise they remain the same. As you can see here, the dial and hands have already been removed, the watch has been uncased, and the day wheel is removed simply by lifting it away, and after that the spring and jumper for the day wheel are removed, each held with a screw, as you see just here. Following this, the star wheel that actuates the day date change is removed, and then the date change wheel to the left of that is removed. That's held by a screw and is made up of two components. The cover plate for the date ring is retained by 3 screws, which are removed, and the cover plate lifted away. This allows removal of the date ring and the geared wheel for the date change mechanism. And here I'm removing the date wheel jumper and jumper spring, which simply sit on posts. And we then move on to the time setting components, the hour wheel, the minute wheel, and the intermediate wheel. And then the date wheel setting components. The larger disc here is the second part of the components, which the first of which was removed prior to removing the date ring retaining cover. Next to be removed is the cannon pinion. And then we go on to remove the quick date change mechanism lever. This is comprised of a cover plate, 2 pivoted parts and a spring. Care must be taken when removing the spring, as it's a very strong stiff spring and can, if given the chance, ping off into the ether. It's very common for this plate to be found to be rusty on a lot of the Indian imports, so a good clean up prior to washing in the watch machine might be required. Here we're removing the cover plate for the keyless works, the yoke spring and setting lever. And once these are removed, this allows us to remove the stem, the winding pinion and the clutch wheel. This completes disassembly of the dial side, and we now turn the movement over and begin stripping the motion works side. First of all, we remove the automatic winding bridge. The oscillating weight was removed prior to uncasing the movement, which is something I tend to do with automatics, as often the oscillating weight can prevent the movement sitting well in the holder, so it's easier to do this in the case. The automatic works are largely, with the exception of one little spring pointed out here, are largely fitted to the bridge underneath the automatic bridge, rather than onto the automatic bridge itself, as a lot of watches are, and it is made up of 3 individual geared and pinion cogs, as you can see, and a smaller twin-wheeled geared cog, which I actually remove in a little while. You'll notice it's just above the balance wheel there, and this simply slots into place, and this is what operates the bi-directional winding mechanism. Here I'm removing the balance cock. And here's the twin geared reversing mechanism mentioned previously. Now we remove the pallet fork, noting that the power was actually relieved from the mainspring prior to stripping the motion works side. The pallet fork on these models is quite an unusual design. It only has one banking pin and a hole in the pallet fork, and the hole actually acts as the stop rather than being a lever in between 2 banking pins. Next for removal is the crown wheel, the ratchet wheel and the click and click spring. The crown wheel is held by a left-handed screw thread, as is usually the case. The click and click spring are separate components, and the click spring is very small and fine, so care must be taken not to allow that to ping out, because you will have trouble locating it if it does. We then move on to the main bridge, which covers the train of wheels and the mainspring barrel, and this is held with 3 screws, all of equal length. And then we can remove the escape wheel, 3rd and 4th wheels, and the mainspring barrel. The final component for removal is the centre wheel bridge and the centre wheel. Here I'm refitting the balance cock before the whole thing goes into the cleaning machine, just checking that it's swinging freely and the mainspring is removed from the barrel in the conventional way by allowing that to come out bit by bit. All of the parts are inspected, goes through the cleaning machine, and it's again inspected to make sure that everything is clean, and we can begin reassembly. And reassembly is, as all the good manuals say, a reverse of the disassembly. So we begin with the centre wheel and centre wheel bridge after oiling the pivots. The mainspring inside its barrel is refitted. This is wound back in with a mainspring winder, but can be done by hand. And being an automatic movement, it has a slipping mainspring, so you must remember to grease the barrel walls. The 3rd, 4th and escape wheels are all fitted to their respective pivots, and then the cover plate is applied and all of the pivots wiggled into place until they seat correctly. You have to be very, very careful not to use force when seating a bridge onto train wheels, especially if you've got multiple train wheels. It has to be done very carefully with judicious juggling and tweaking until everything drops into place, because it's very easy to break a pivot. So there I was holding down the bridge once everything was seated with a bit of pegwood whilst tightening all the screws, and then I can go on to refitting the pallet fork. Oiling of the pivots on the back front and back plates are done once this is assembled in the oil cups of the pivots, with the exception of the fourth wheel, where the second pinion passes through and a small amount of oil is applied to the shaft of the fourth wheel. A small amount of grease is applied to the crown wheel, or to the crown wheel pivot rather, pivot post. And the same with the click and click spring. And then the ratchet wheel is secured onto its post, and after the ratchet wheel, after the barrel arbor rather, is oiled, a full wind is added to the mainspring barrel, and then we go ahead and refit the balance. The chaton and balance end stones, incidentally, are removed and manually cleaned after they've gone through the watch cleaning machine. They're left in place during the cleaning assembly to make sure that the balance doesn't move around too much in the cleaning machine and risk damaging the delicate pivots. And here I'm oiling the pivot points for the train wheels. And then we move over to the dial side of the movement and begin by refitting the cannon pinion. And then onto the keyless works. Refitting the springs can be quite tricky, so it's important to either use the tip of a finger or a piece of pegwood or something similar to hold things in place while manipulating a spring under tension into a locking position. And it's very easy for one of these to ping away whilst under tension if it's not held securely, so care must be taken during the refitting of any of these springs. Appropriate contact points between springs and levers and any of the moving parts has a small amount of grease applied. And we now reassemble the quick date change mechanism, which works on the pusher button above the crown. And once again, the spring is fitted and either a finger or piece of pegwood must be used to hold this in place while it's manipulated into place, as without that there's a high likelihood that it will just ping off and disappear. Once the cover plate is refitted, I'm just giving that a bit of a push with some pegwood to check that both of the levers are moving as they should, and we can then go on to assemble the hand setting and date setting works. The intermediate wheel, the minute wheel, the date change assembly, and the hour wheel. Once the date ring is in place, it must be held, as you can see here, because it's under tension from the date jumper, and it must be held in place while the cover plate and at least one of the securing screws is fastened down to ensure that it doesn't jump out, as realigning the jumper once the plate is in place is impossible. And there I'm just winding the mechanism to check that the date advance works as it should before continuing with the day date assembly with the star wheel. Following which we add the jumper spring and jumper for the day wheel star. Both of which are held in place by an individual screw as mentioned during disassembly. And then assembly is completed by refitting the day wheel. It has a large cutout window off-centered, which is placed, as you can see here, above the jumper mechanism so that you're able to fit either a thin pair of tweezers or a screwdriver, as I use here, to move the lever backwards so that it engages with the day wheel advance star. We then go ahead and refit the dial, and here I'm just checking the day and date advance and also getting the movement into the appropriate position to refit the hands so that the day and date change at midnight as they should. I then recase the movement and we move on to reassembling the automatic works. The 3 gears are fitted in place after the pivot holes are oiled, the lower ones. The upper ones are oiled in the pivot cups once the bridge is in place. Fitting the bridge on these is quite a fiddle. It has a tendency to lock, so you have to manipulate the crown while wiggling the bridge down to lock it in place until you can manually wind it, but the bridge is locked in place adequately, and you then refit the screws. And the final part is the refitting of the oscillating weight, which simply drops into place. There is no alignment necessary as you would find on, say, a Seiko. You just drop this into place and screw it in place. And to complete, I add a small amount of oil to the bearings of the oscillating weight, because this has gone through the cleaning machine with the rest of the movement. I hope you found this useful. Thank you for watching, and I plan to do a series of lesser seen watches such as this Ricoh and things like HMT and Vostok Kommanderskia and such like, the watches that you seldom see on YouTube. So thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.